All right. Okay. I think we're on. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode. I have a special guest with me, Teen Sheng. If I pronounced that correct, is that right?
Close enough. Yeah, Sheng.
Yeah.
Sheng. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about the Wall Street bets, the GameStop short situation, and everything like that, which might seem like it's kind of old news to some people, but there's a bigger kind of conversation around, well, what exactly happened? What does it mean? Where are we going from here? You are an American working in the finance industry, so you have quite detailed information about this. You've been following it very closely also. And we've been chatting over the past few days, and it's been interesting to see you saying, I think this is going to happen next. And it's pretty much all played out exactly like you said. So, who knows? When we're finished uploading, there's probably a bunch of other stuff is still going to happen. This isn't fully played out, but it's going to be really interesting to talk about this. So beforehand, how about you just give a brief introduction to yourself before we get into the meat of the discussion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like most people these days, I have sort of an online. I can intro who I am online and who I am in normal life. Like you said, I work in the finance industry, so I've always had I've been following it because of that. I used to work. I'm in the private sector now, but I used to work at the SEC, and so I sort of have like a regulatory background as to probably what they're thinking over at the government about all of this. So, and I also, am terminally online as well on Twitter. And we also have, me and some friends put together an online publication and podcast called Plan A. You can find it at planamag.com, and there's a podcast called Escape from Plan A. And we've talked about Wall Street bets. We're not always focused on finance and stuff, but we have been talking more about economics and things like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So what I'll do also is I'll leave the description. In the description, I'll put the link to your publications and your podcast, so everybody can follow you who may be interested. So maybe a good place to start. I think most people have a general idea of what exactly happened, but maybe we'll talk about that first. About what is it exactly that happened that everybody's talking about?
Right. I mean, I think that by the time the media caught on to this story, it seemed like this was something that just sort of spontaneously happened. Mm-hmm. But if you follow what was going on with GameStop, before it became this speculative frenzy, there were people that were going into this stock actually saying that they thought it was undervalued. So when it first started, 6 months ago, the stock was at $4, $5. There were people on WallStreetBets, which at the time was a much smaller forum than it is now. I mean, it grew to 8.5 million people over the course of a few days. But at that time, and I wasn't around for this, but looking back, there were people who were trying to invest in GameStop because they thought it's too quick to say that GameStop is just the blockbuster of video games in a Netflix world, right? That there was a new management team coming in that had new ideas as to how to generate revenue and how to enhance the brand. And so people were legitimately thinking GameStop was an undervalued stock, right? And this is at $4 or $5 a share.
And just a quick question. Just a quick question. So at that point, and maybe sorry to interrupt you, maybe you were going to mention it anyways. At that point, were the shorts from the hedge companies already in place while they were having this discussion?
I think they were. See, no one really knows what the short positions are. Those aren't really publicly reported. So you have to kind of guess as to what the short positions are. The SEC will publish the short interest that I think is as close to official as it gets. But that's only, I think, twice a month, right? So there's definitely no real-time data. There's some data coming in from market that is an estimate based on the number of sales that are marked short, but that's both an unreliable figure and you have no idea what the net short position is. So that's been a problem the whole time. But they did figure out, I think, through some of the regulatory filings of this Melvin Capital, which is a hedge fund. I would not call it a short fund. They don't specialize in short selling. They're a highly levered fund, but they wanted to short this stock. And I think they caught on to the fact that they probably, given all the information that they knew, that they could know, that they were shorting GameStop to the point where I think they had taken a short position in more shares than were publicly available. So all of the stock shares that make up what they call the public float, what's available for trading, let's call it 65 million shares of GameStop out there in public circulating in one form or another, that they were probably short something along the lines of double that or 1.5 times that, something crazy. People didn't even realize you could do that. right? So how can you bet against more shares than exist, right? So these are highly levered trades. So somewhere in that point, they figured, look, this might be something of a classic short squeeze, where if we pile into the stock and drive the price higher, that it will force I mean, and this is the story that everyone now knows, right? Is that Melvin Capital would start losing money every time the stock goes up because they've bet against it. So then they would have to go out and buy shares back to close out their short positions, and so that creates what they call a squeeze, a upward cycle in price.
Yeah, that's an important piece for people who aren't really technical in the markets, that it wasn't just these traders alone that had that amount of leverage to increase the price by that much. It basically created a snowball effect where these hedge funds needed to buy back those positions and kind of stop the bleeding, and it just kind of pushed it all the way up. But yeah, so there seems to be a point then, I guess, where it evolved from just based on the fundamentals, people saying, hey, listen, this I think this is undervalued. And then slowly all of these other elements started getting revealed where people are like, hold on a second here. And was there, did you look at the evolution of the conversation in the group where people, did they get into a conversation where they were saying this is wrong, or they are way over leveraged, this shouldn't be right? Or how did it develop from there in terms of the conversation?
I came very late to the WallStreetBets conversation. By the time I came in, I started seeing, I came in like everyone else did through popular media reports and things like that. And so by the time I started looking, we were already into this sort of speculative bubble, and it wasn't totally clear. And it's probably a mix, right? Is the price going, from something like $4 or $5 a few months ago to $9 to $15, and then all of a sudden this vertical line up to like 100 plus? Was that because WallStreetBets and these small retail investors on Robinhood were piling into the stock and essentially pumping the stock? Or was it a short squeeze that was going on, and that the funds that were covering the shorts were actually in the short squeeze? And so I thought that was an interesting question, because you don't really know. And looking back, it's probably almost certainly both, because we know now that the hedge funds have been covering the short positions. So but what was interesting though was that the conversation on WallStreetBets was to say, look, we're this they liken themselves a bit to to the apes in Planet of the Apes, where they're like heavily outgunned and stuff, but they know that if apes stay together, apes are strong, right? And so they just reduced it to this very simple credo, which was, if you can buy, and if you buy, hold, and just never sell, because at some point it's got to be the case that they're going to get squeezed, and then we're going to go, quote, to the moon. And they started a lot of really funny lingo started developing, where they would say stuff like, I pardon the language, I guess, but they would say stuff like, we can stay retarded for longer than they can stay solvent, meaning like, let's break every single rule of rational investing. But if we do it as a group, we can finally force Wall Street and Melvin Capital. I don't know if they had anything specific against Melvin Capital, except as an avatar for Wall Street, which I think is still in America a very hated group of people, because they never paid the price for what they were seen to have done in 2008, right? And the amount of pain that was inflicted on regular people. And so I started being really interested in this, because I'm like, are people in this to make money because they think that there's an opportunity here, a once in a lifetime opportunity, to basically blackmail Wall Street into handing over billions of dollars? Or was this a way to really about to inflict pain on a class of, a financier class that always seems to win? And that was
when you were exploring that question, did you get close to an answer where they stood, closer to one side or the other, or it was really kind of a mix of both kinds of people in there? Did you get any sense of that when you were asking that question?
I felt that it was definitely a mix of both, and and it wasn't just some people were in it for inflicting pain and revenge, right? And I would say exacting justice, and some people were in it just to make some quick cash. I think it wasn't just that there were those two types of people, but that the people themselves were of two minds. And so almost everyone probably had a bit of both within themselves, right? And so when the price goes up, it was probably a little bit more greed, and when the price goes down, it was probably a little bit more like, look, I'm in this because, I am willing to accept financial loss. I'm willing to experience pain because I want the other side to feel pain. I want I want Stephen A. Cohen to feel pain. I want Ken Griffin to feel pain, things like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to change my connection here. Okay. Sorry about that. So now I'm back. Mm-hmm. All right. So now we've got an idea of who was involved. Obviously, halfway through the game, all of a sudden the rules of the game changed. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think like the sheer amount of volume that was coming in through the fact that the media started reporting it brought millions of people into Reddit, specifically WallStreetBets, and the site grew from. I think when I first looked at it, there were probably like 2 million subscribers, and the next day there were 4 million, and then it was 5, 6. I think currently it's 9 million or something close to that. So a lot of people, and not just in the U.S. but around the world, and they were trading this thing 24 hours overnight. People in Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Germany, England were all coming in and reporting what they were driving the price up to overnight. So this was a round the clock thing, and people were staying up all night. It was like a global party to try and crash Wall Street. And so sorry, I kind of forgot the question there a little bit, but I mean, yeah, it started to go through the roof.
Yeah. Basically, there were some mechanisms put in place to stop the bleeding, which was part of a big part of the outrage. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the number of people that are coming in and then placing retail orders, what started happening is you started hearing people like in the UK, for example, saying, "Oh, I'm using this discount retail broker 212 Trading, and they've locked me out of these names." And it was specifically the meme stocks, the ones that were targeted. It wasn't just GameStop that was the biggest one, but there was AMC, Nokia, BlackBerry, etc. And they were saying all of these stocks have been prohibited on my trading app. And then when it got to US trading hours, Robinhood did the thing that kind of everyone knew would be like the most damaging to, or most helpful to the hedge funds and most damaging to the WallStreetBets retail investors, was that they only allowed you to sell your stock in these names, but you were not allowed to buy. So it's kind of ridiculous. But if you wanted to go in and tilt the scales in favor of the hedge funds to help them out, what they want to do is they want to buy the shares back at like a depressed price, right? They don't want new buyers coming in to hoard up the available shares to buy. So they would just say, like, can you just go to their app and just hide the buy button, but keep the sell button? Like if they took out both, you can't sell, you can't buy, then it's not really helpful either. But they only did the sell button. So that I felt, and even when I saw that, I was like, this is very conspiratorial sounding. I mean, this is very strange, and people were really looking for, an answer. The one thing the reason I was like, I'm not sure that this is conspiratorial in that sense, was because in following it, I had heard that there were many other retail investors that were doing the same thing. Right. So it wasn't just Robinhood, it was 212 Trading, and it was I think Webull had done it. A number of retail brokers had limited the amount of shares that people could trade in this. And there are reasons that could be the case. But anyway, people were very rightfully livid about what happened. So
yeah, right. I remember seeing some explanations where some of the kind of CEOs of these trading platforms, they said they gave the technical reason as to why they had to do it, because of the 2-day settling period, not having the funds available to do these trades and all this kind of stuff. But you had an interesting response to me when I said maybe it wasn't a collusion, maybe it wasn't a deliberate people getting together to do this.
Yeah,
you remember? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. So the idea being like, okay, did like Citadel sit down and Citadel has, I mean, there are conflicts of interest, no doubt, right? So
Yeah.
Citadel is the one that's like doing a lot of like the trade routing for Robinhood and stuff. Like, did they have a hand in some way to make the clearinghouses require more margin when it came to delivering through shares of GameStop or whatever? I mean, I don't know, maybe, but the sheer amount of volume that was coming in, and the fact that it was like very small lots, and there were a lot of accounts across a lot of different platforms, all trading and piling into the same name, and you saw these price swings that were just absolutely insane. And think about it, you're talking about like an app that lets you trade before you settle cash into it. So it's kind of like taking on your word that you're going to put cash in there. There is risk in the system. So I do believe that there was a plausible risk management reason, systemic risk management reason to limit the amount of shares that were going to be transacted. But in my opinion, if that was the outcome, was that the retail investors ended up, having the scales tilted against them.
Right.
And that's even more damning because it doesn't take collusion to produce this outcome. The system as it normally works is already tilted against the retail investor. So if it turns out there was no collusion, I think the outcome's even worse, because the next time this happens, through normal functioning of the market, retail investors are going to get screwed again. Right. So
yeah. I mean, that's a really important point. There were no mechanisms in place for these hedge funds to short more than what was available in the market, but now there's mechanisms in place to let them to make these absolutely crazy trades, and the system is designed in such a way that they'll only bleed out to a certain point, and then all of a sudden it's gonna, the buck's gonna stop on the retail investor. I mean, it definitely seems like the whole system is designed to benefit one group of people.
Yeah, I think, and I think there's going to be a lot of fallout from that, and and it's kind of sad because Robinhood is going to go down, and I don't think Robinhood is necessarily like the greatest actor here, but there's a lot of firms out there like Citadel, I think, and Sat Capital, and all these like the Tiger Cub hedge funds and all these like supremely levered funds that totally introduce tons of risk into the system, and they're gonna make out with profits, and they're fine. But Robinhood, which I think tried to democratize finance, I'm not a fan of Robinhood. I don't use Robinhood, but I'm just saying, like, if the one firm that's going to go down for all of this activity is Robinhood, I mean, people are angry at Robinhood, but if you take the longer view, that's kind of upsetting too, right? I mean, it's the retail broker that has to go down, but all the systemically massive firms that profit from this all day, they're fine.
I mean, it's the perfect scapegoat, especially with their name also, Robinhood, and this is what you're going to end up doing. I mean, it's the perfect person to pin this on. And I mean, I'm just thinking like how this whole system works. I mean, a shorting, from what I've understood from all of my friends who do trading here in China, where I'm located, shorting isn't allowed on the market here. It's not done. But it's it seems like it's a predatory practice to begin with. I remember seeing some of these actors in the U.S., some of these funds, there was one particular guy, what he would do is he would, for example, short a medical stock, and then he would go out and he would dispute their patent to drop the price of the stock and profit a lot, while the people who are waiting for those medicines to come out are suffering and not getting their medicines in time. Now, the SEC and organizations go after people like that for shorting and distorting, but there's nothing that happens in the market in the meanwhile to all of a sudden change the rules to limit the damage. I mean, shorting, and you have these, I believe it was George Soros also who went and shorted the Thai baht and kind of destroyed their currency through these shorting kind of mechanisms, and now all of a sudden, because you were saying, I didn't realize there were so many people around the world participating in this GameStop thing, but when you were saying they wanted to inflict pain on Wall Street also, maybe some people would be like, oh, well, that definitely is something that needs to stop if foreigners are getting involved in wanting to crash Wall Street. This is what they've done to foreign currencies all along. Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm actually curious also, what are your thoughts in shorting in general and how this whole system works from that point of view?
I mean, it can be done. I mean, it's not. I don't think there's anything inherently. It's a tool. It's a financial tool, and there's nothing inherently wrong. I don't think with shorting in the sense that there are ethical short sellers. Like for example, like probably one of the most famous short bets of all time was Jim Chanos in shorting against Enron, right? And he was trying to say, look, there's a lot of fraud going on. I mean, your classic ethical short seller existed, and their job was to go and basically be a watchdog on corporate America and say, they try to do that with with GE recently, to say that GE is actually engaging in massive accounting fraud, which could be true. And so that used to be what short selling was. But then, there's this predatory form of short selling where you go short, you don't tell anyone about it, and try to, tank the stock and make an easy profit, which I think is what was going on in this case with GameStop. To short 140% of the available float. I mean, that's not even a safe way of doing it. I mean, that's just these people don't even know what they're doing, right? And they ended up losing 50% of their fund because of it. But the problem with short selling, and I know China is cautious about it, is because if you think about how a short sale works, it results in a situation where one stock is owned by two different people. So there's the lender who lent the stock to the short seller, right? So what happens is I borrow the stock from someone that owns it, and then I sell it to lock in my short sale price, hoping for it to go down. Later, I buy it back and return it to where I lent it from. So that means that the lender who gave it to me, he didn't sell it to me, right? The lender didn't sell it to me. They lent it to me. So it's still their stock and they are owed it back. But then when I sold it into the market, whoever bought it owns that stock outright. So this share that's now been shorted kind of exists in this sort of neither world where it's owned by two people. And that's why it has to be covered. It's expensive because it's risky. And so you have to make sure to close it out so that you don't have this issue of like one share of stock being owned by two people. And now you have this situation where, okay, extrapolate that out to more shares than exist now are under this situation. I don't even know what that means, right? So I think there are some inherently risky things about short selling. And, I think China's right to be a little bit. I know they've allowed it to some degree in Shenzhen, on the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, but nothing like to the approach to the levels that are being done in the U.S. It's ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah, I remember hearing that there were some types of mechanisms for shorting. That's why I was saying, from what I heard from some people, but I don't think it happens on the same level here that I've seen happening over there. Now, before we move on from the Wall Street Bets crowd, also the interesting thing is, though, I guess technically speaking, there would have probably been a lot of retail investors that got into that stock just before they closed off the buy button, just before nobody else could at least from the retail side could buy it from them. So there's going to be a lot of retail investors that are going to lose money from this too, that they were kind of getting in just before the party, just before they shut the doors on this whole thing. Are you seeing any fallout from that, or any discussion about that, about people saying, oh, what are we going to do now? What's going on? Like, what's the community like now? Because I guess it's this, what's supposed to be a stalemate. Everybody's supposed to agree also not to sell and to hold on. But you're going to inevitably get some people taking some profit. And it's like that philosophy question where if you've got two people going to prison and if one rats out the other, he's going to be safe. But if both stay silent, it's like this philosophical
this is game
question.
theory on steroids. That's another fascinating thing about these sort of like speculative bubbles is it's all game theory all the way down, right? Like, do you want to take advantage of the situation personally and lose out on the bigger goal, or, what do you want to do? And so I think this will be studied for a while in terms of how this played out. But yeah, I mean, what maybe if the question is like, what kind of recourse will people have because they're, because Robinhood, froze the. I don't think they're going to have much recourse against the brokers. I think that there is going to be it seems like there's going to be hearings in Congress about what happened, and they're going to want to go through this, and the SEC is going to investigate. And but whether people are going to get compensated for this, I think if people lost money in this, they've lost money. I don't know if our system of stock trading has any mechanism whatsoever to make people whole on risks that they took. And Robinhood, and this is probably why they maintain that sell button, is like, look, we were trying to prevent you from putting on risk by leaving the sale button there. We made sure that all of our customers had a way to exit the trade, which would be to reduce the risk, right? So they could even argue that look at how this thing played out. What we did was the right thing. We were encouraging you to sell out of a position that we basically knew was going to be a pump and dump Ponzi scheme bubble, right? So it's going to be hard for people to get paid back.
Now, on the other hand, on the flip side, for the hedge funds, so obviously they had the first step of the bleeding being stopped to a certain degree, but also a lot of stories popping up of hedge funds bailing out other hedge funds who got in a little bit too far over their head. You're definitely, I mean, that's not something you're going to see on the retail side. If you've lost your money, you've lost your money. But that's a lot of that's been going on, where you see kind of these funds and these groups who are affected by their bad shorts, kind of making sure that they all survive. I mean, it all seems kind of, it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem, the people who created this mess, they seem to have a lot more recourse, a lot more protection, don't they?
They do. I think they lost money. I mean, Melvin Capital reported that they lost 53% in January alone. And they're a $12 billion fund, so they lost more than $6 billion in this. And if you add up the total of what Wall Street suffered from this, they suffered. And so I think if this had been a trade where people were just like, look, I'm willing to throw in some amount of money that I'm willing to lose on a risky bet, but the whole purpose of it is to inflict pain on Wall Street. If that was what people went into it for, well, mission accomplished. I mean, I think that they really did I think they did inflicted real financial pain. I know people that are working at hedge funds that are genuinely freaked out by what's going on. And it was a very upsetting event for people in professional markets. So accomplished. I mean, if that was the goal, I think that they accomplished it.
Right.
Yeah. But if the goal was to make money, most of them probably made out, lost.
Right. I mean, do you think this will? I mean, it seems like a lot more effective than I mean, a lot of the discontent about how the financial systems work, how they're balanced. I mean, that's a lot of what the Occupy Wall Street was about. And I mean, if you look at what happened after Occupy Wall Street in terms of the wealth gap increasing and all this stuff, it doesn't seem to have really done anything. Do you think this? Unlike the Occupy Wall Street, will actually accomplish anything? Is there going to be any real change that comes out of this, where people say, okay, you know what, people are really unhappy, this has exposed a bigger issue, or like what do you think comes next? Is there anything positive that comes out of this?
I mean, sadly, again, I think it depends what your time frame is. I think immediately in the near term, no. And instead of, I think Occupy, I think it's, Occupy, I think, was a bit more of a positive, organized movement, and what came out of Occupy in the longer term, I think, was the sort of the DemSoc, Bernie Sanders, led movements that came. Was that successful? Probably to some extent. I mean, I think that really did change politics in a real way, and there was power behind it. But this, I think, this event, I actually thought that it had more in common with the storming of the Capitol. In many ways.
Okay.
And that, what it really was about was this sort of like rage and this, I mean, you have to understand, like, you're in China, like living in the US, there's the population here is feeling a lot more desperate and a lot more angry. And the situation here is totally different than what's going on in China. And, I think people here are looking for some sort of cathartic event. They're looking for just the same way that, for example, like, let's put it this way, the QAnon folks were looking for a sort of culminating event. They thought that come when the inauguration on January 20th started, they really truly believed, and they were holding on, and this is how they kept the fervor alive in their movement, was this belief that January 20th was going to be a very special day. And if you watch television that day, that we would see the coup, or whatever it was that Trump had been planning. They really believed that there was going to be a culminating event, and you saw this here too. If you follow what they were saying online, they really believed that if you just held on despite losses, if you bought in at $350, it doesn't matter, and you're down to 190, hold on, because we promise you that. And then they come up with any number of explanations, all of them probably lies. Like, oh, we found out that they have a huge option position that if it blows up, if it gets called on Friday will be the day that the infinity squeeze happens, and we're going to have, you can sell your stock for $10,000 if you want. It's going to change your life. So they were, it was the same thing where it was a group of people maintaining faith, hope in change, faith that something would finally change. And not just in a vague term, but specifically on this day. And people wanted to believe that. And I think the psychology that was driving that, the Wall Street Bets thing, is every bit as disturbing and sad as what drove people to storm the Capitol or to buy into a conspiracy theory like QAnon.
So do you think then, like, from what it sounds like, a lot of these things that are happening, like even storming the Capitol, underneath it all, if you dig down to the most basic layer, it really comes down to a discontent with how specifically the way that the capitalist system is set up there. I mean, I remember I watched actually a couple days ago an interesting video where it was from before Trump was elected, and they went to this small town. It was one of the poorest towns in the poorest states of America, and I wanted to find out why it was the most pro-Trump town. And they were just like coal miners who had been out of business, out of jobs for a long time. Their city was decaying, their town rather. And they said, well, because he says he's going to bring back the coal mines, he's going to put us back to work. For them, it was about economics. It was about, hope that Donald Trump would at least change the balance in their favor a little bit. Is that what it all comes down to? A lot of these movements in the most basic terms.
I think yes, it does. I think that it's sad because you saw so like as this trade was going on, what happened? You saw people like Mark Cuban come out and start pretending like he's like the man of the people. And he's going on CNBC saying like, hold. He starts adopting the language of the crowd, right? Like diamond hands, hold you apes, right? And the crowd goes crazy because they're like, oh, it's Mark Cuban's defending us on TV. He's a billionaire. You saw Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, come out, say, oh, I'm so proud of you guys. You guys are doing what I could never do. This is what I always want to do with my career. You saw hucksters and scam artists come out of the woodwork to capture the energy and the potential for profit and fame. When you see 8.5 million people starting piling onto this, you see the charlatans come out and try and co-opt the movement. And that's what Trump is. That's what Trump was for these people. He was a Mark Cuban type that saw all the fervor and all the discontent, and he tried to step in and appropriate that for himself. And the people who get hurt are the people who want to believe so bad that they will think that a Mark Cuban or a Jordan Belfort could actually be on their side.
Right.
And and so that's the danger.
And at the end of the day, it's going to be the same people that were thrown under the bus always before that are going to be thrown under the bus again, it seems like. I mean, it just seems like, for me, the thing that's scary for me when I look at the American political system, at least from the outside, is just how much money is involved in it, how much money is involved in politics. I mean, the people who sponsor a lot of these politicians are the same people that these groups, these grassroots groups, are trying to fight against. I just, you say that, sure, from the 2008, from the Occupy Wall Street, all this stuff, there's some good things that came out of it. You got, Bernie Sanders, but at the end of the day, when, I don't know if you were following, for example, the AOC force the vote situation. When it came down to the wire, when she had an opportunity to leverage her vote for the Speaker of the House to force a vote on Medicare for all in the middle of the pandemic, she backed down from it, saying, we've got to preserve our political energy or whatever it is. But then when it came to impeaching Trump, she said that, well, it doesn't matter if it's useless. It's about sending a message. Mm-hmm. Well, what about sending a message about healthcare for all during a pandemic? I mean, these are the kinds of things that would start to probably help a lot of these people who are discontent with the way that the capitalist system is particularly playing out. I know basically what I'm trying to get to with going through some of these thoughts is there really any hope for change? If there is, how does it happen? Is there anything happening that looks like it's going in that direction? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. I think that's a really good question, and I think that the force the vote and AOC and that controversy being like, Was AOC willing to go against her party and with, possibly threaten the re-election of Nancy Pelosi to the House speakership, and basically forcing the issue of Medicare for all onto a floor vote? And, her response was, that's bad strategy. This is not how you accomplish, reform within the system. So the question is that the way about it? Because I think she's right on that front. I don't think that there was any tactical advantage to doing what Jimmy Dore wants to do. But in my mind, I don't think Jimmy Dore gives a shit about change within the system. I don't think, and I think more and more people, what you're seeing is a loss of faith in institutions. And people don't believe that Congress is going to have the answer one way or another. What they want to do is storm Congress, and they want to tear down institutions because they don't believe in it anymore. I don't know if I don't think the answer is necessarily to tear down institutions, or to cause a financial crisis by willfully going out and trying to create systemic risk that cannot be managed in a system, and so then we will all experience a catastrophic recession or financial crisis. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I think that, on the other hand, I don't think people have any hope that Wall Street will ever be on their side. And I don't think people have any hope that Congress will ever be on their side. So Americans are, we're stuck in a catch-22, because it's like, we're never going to get what we want through organized, constructive, activity. I mean, look at what they did to Bernie. I mean, that's as legitimate and mainstream a movement as you can think of. And they crushed him 2 elections in a row. Right. In New York, we had a huge rally for him in Queens. I didn't even get to vote for him because by the time the primary came around to New York, he was, was over. And so the way that elites in America have held on to power has so destroyed the basic trust in or faith in institutions that they're almost forcing people into the hands of people like Trump and into the hands of people like the, charlatans, like the ones that you see on TV that are trying to now capture, who else is doing it? Like, what's that guy on Fox News? I always forget his name. Anyway, these people in media, they're always in media. They're always able to get their names in front of populist discontent and say the cool thing, say the lingo, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, this guy's just like us. He hates the system just like us. It's unbelievable, and he's on CNBC. This is unreal. Yeah, and then he becomes an avatar. He adopts your lingo, and it's a very powerful connection. I mean, I've got to say, like, in watching this happen in real time with WallStreetBets, and how it used specific terminologies, and then you see someone go on live TV and use that terminology, you suddenly feel like, wow, this is real. And that's exactly what Trump did. Right?
I mean, how many times can that really happen, though, where it happens over and over? This guy's really on our side, but nothing actually happens. Nothing really changes. I mean, you got to think that there's got to be a certain point. For me personally, I cover a lot of more kind of American foreign policy stuff. I think what they're doing in terms of pointing out enemies abroad, whether it be Venezuela or China or all this stuff, is one of the essential benefits of that. One of the essential drivers is to kind of deflect attention away from home. I mean, me personally, like when I'm asking you what's next, like what can possibly be done, I think stopping with that and starting to focus on your own country is probably a good thing. But I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's next. Do you think that actually this isn't something I talked to you about at all? Do you think that perhaps the Bitcoin and this kind of stuff that's going on because I mean that was born in 2008 during the original financial crisis as a way to kind of exit the legacy finance system to a certain degree. Do you think a lot of people are looking at this? I don't know what your thoughts are on cryptocurrency, but they're looking at this possibly as a way to exit this system. Maybe it's ironic because a lot of the hedge funds, Visa, PayPal, all of these people are getting in ahead of the curve now. They're getting into it now. But what are your thoughts on that? Is that a possible thing where people, because obviously I'm not sure how familiar you are with Bitcoin. It's got a fixed inflation rate and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Is there a possible thing there that could, I mean, if you look at the price, I mean, it sounds like it's real, right? And if you look at
the kinds of investors that are going in, and there's institutional interest in it now, and not it's not all speculative people like Michael Saylor, if people know that name, but it's not just people like Michael Saylor, who's a bit of a kook, let's be honest. But it's some more conservative type investors that are going into it. I think, but it's hard to say. I've been thinking about Bitcoin more and more. I don't own any Bitcoin. I don't own any crypto. And I think there is definitely a very scammy tulip mania aspect to crypto. But on the other hand, I think like when, the question may not be, is Bitcoin a scam? The question might be, is the American financial system safe?
A bigger scam.
Yeah, is it a bigger scam? Exactly. Right. Which is the bigger scam, right? And that might be the question. And I think that I think the idea that the U.S. financial system is operating at a red line that is not safe is not a fringe view at all. I think the mainstream view now among the intellectual class that actually you should or could take very seriously is very concerned about the American monetary system, financial system, and the safety and soundness of it. And that makes Bitcoin seem a little bit more not so crazy, right? And I think if the U.S. financial system was working as in a normal sense and that it was safe, yeah, it's probably tulip mania. But who knows? I don't know. Nobody knows the answer because it's path dependent on what people collectively decide it is. But for me personally, I have always thought it was scammy until lately, and I'm like, maybe it is for real. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't really talk about Bitcoin on my channel because I realize that a lot of people are in the same mindset. They think it's scammy. I mean, it's been around for 10 years. It's got a fixed monetary policy. It's decentralized, not controlled by a central. And at the end of the day, when you look at the history of money, it's a matter of deciding what are you going to assign value for.
Exactly.
A lot of people are looking at gold as an alternative, but for the most part, it still relies on the system where nobody's buying physical bars of gold and storing it in their house. You still rely on institutions, whereas Bitcoin, if you own your private keys, you own that Bitcoin. So yeah, for me, I mean, this wasn't going to be a talk about crypto, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. But I think you're probably right. I mean, the fact that the traditional finance system and fiat currencies in general, which seems to be more and more like a house of cards, is getting people to think more about these alternative options. I mean, how much longer can we go on like this? Is really my question, Well,
it depends on the economy too. I don't know if there's anything necessarily wrong with fiat money per se, and I think that the view that fiat money is inherently bad is probably not is going a little too far. But I think that when fiat money is abused the way that it gets abused in the United States, and that when you have an economy that's basically like it's not a productive economy anymore. Like all we do is consume. And there's no material economy left, right? It makes me wonder, like, why are people so tied to the US dollar? There's other games going around. I mean, there's obviously, you're in China, that. There's other games in town now. You don't have to be beholden to the US dollar, but yet it seems like we are in America are doing everything we can. We're pulling out all the stops to make sure that nobody ever is able to get out of the U.S. financial system. And I think Bitcoin is Bitcoin, but I think the much bigger threat to, we call it a threat in America, but I think the much bigger promise in the world is probably digital yuan. Yeah. I think that that's a fundamental subversion of how the financial system, of our monopoly on the financial system.
Oh, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be a game changer. I mean, in terms of the ability to bank the unbanked as well, and all of the things, all the features that come with blockchain currencies. But I mean, America's been doing a really good job of incentivizing people to find an alternative, also with how heavily weaponized it is. Penalizing other people for, for example, they walk away from the Iran nuclear deal, and then all of a sudden, the European countries that haven't walked away from it can't trade with Iran in U.S. dollars anymore. So I remember they set up a system. I read it in Kishore Mahbubani's book. I think it was called Intex or Instex or something like that. They created an alternative settlement method because a lot of their banks got hit with huge fines from still trading in the U.S. dollar. But I actually agree with you. The digital yen, that's going to be really interesting to see how that develops, because that is going to be completely, I mean, and it's so easy to deploy. You know, you're not going through the SWIFT system. You're not going through any of these legacy finance system. It's completely, all you have to do is own a mobile phone. That's a
well, and I mean, in that, it's for me, it's more that you don't have to trust China. And I think that's the key, because under the US dollar system, you have to trust America to do the right thing. So, like, let's take Venezuela, for example. I mean, they have a lot of US dollar reserves because they're an oil exporting country, right? But all their dollars sit in an account at the Federal Reserve. So all of this wealth that the state has is just a number sitting in a computer in either in New York and Washington. And so when the United States decides that we have a political issue that we want to resolve, and we don't want to recognize Maduro anymore, we want to recognize Guaido. Well, what do? They handed control of that account over to Guaido. So you have to trust that America is going to, for example, like, recognize your leader. And if they don't, they could just hand control, like they did. They literally handed control of billions of state assets over to their preferred person. That's called trust. You have to trust that the United States won't do that.
Taking it away from a democratically elected person. It's interesting. It reminded me of, I watched an interview with John Perkins, the author of Economic Hitman. And he was in an interview on Valuetainment, and the host was trying to ask him, because the host is generally has some pretty negative views about China, like many people do, and he was trying to get him to say, well, what China's doing now is what America has always done. They're kind of taking over now. Now they've got their own economic hitmans, and John Perkins, he's a little bit reluctant to respond to it just outright saying, no, that's not true. He tried to sprinkle in some stuff while saying, they build some stuff in Central America and the building qualities are bad. But you know what? Actually, at the end of the day, if you ask these Central American leaders, who would they rather deal with, China or America, even if they're after the same thing, even if they're after the resources, they say, well, China, of course. They're not coming in with political requirements. They're not overthrowing our governments. There's no risk of us being assassinated or something like that. And a lot of that power does come from the U.S. dollar. I didn't realize the story of handing over the U.S. dollar accounts to Guaido. That's yes. Interesting. But yeah. I mean, it seems like that's a ticking time bomb also. And now all of a sudden China's come out with this digital currency. It seems like... yeah, like you said, it requires a lot less trust and a lot less risk for other countries to say.
Yeah, I mean, China's setting up a blockchain system where basically they can't do that, right? They're not going to be the sole arbiter of transactions. So if you hold digital yuan, you hold it, and the Chinese central bank cannot, the PBOC can't just unilaterally take your money.
Right. Yeah.
You can't do that in a blockchain, right? So I think in a way, like, what China's doing here is it's called competing, right? It's saying we can innovate, we can offer a better system. And when people get into these arguments as to, oh, well, yes, the U.S. is shit, we agree. Hey, I'm smart. I know that we have a CIA, we do bad shit, but China is just going to do the same thing. So what's the difference? Well, I mean, I think the proper answer to that should be that, well, no, I mean, two is better than one, because we should be competing with each other, right? Like, if we talk about like debt trap diplomacy and stuff. I mean, okay, yeah, China lends money to countries that may not be creditworthy to pay it back. The question is, are they offering? Is it better to have two lenders in there competing for these contracts, or just one? So, I mean, I think
that's Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, for the blockchain now, this is something I still have to familiarize myself more with for the digital yuan. It's not completely decentralized like Bitcoin. There may be some level. I think that China still controls the monetary policy of it, and it's something I need to investigate more. But even with that, even if they had a level of control over it, it's exactly like you said. Now you have two options, and now you can see which is the more responsible player. If China all of a sudden starts doing the same stuff that the U.S. is doing, well, okay, there's two players in the game now. You can just go to the other player. And it potentially forces the other player to become a little bit more of an honest player to say, well, no, okay, we're going to do it this way now. I mean, that, like you said, that's actually embracing what the types of things that capitalism is supposed to achieve on paper.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I think we're being monopolists, and we are America, I mean. And we don't want to compete, because, frankly, I think we're a little bit frightened. I think we kind of know we're not really all that competitive right now. And what we really lean on is the strength of the monopolist and our ability to crowd out competitors through our monopoly power. That's not any sort of hegemon that you want to do business with, in my opinion.
Right. I think these are the kinds of things that kind of play into one of my biggest fears right now. And I don't know what your opinion will be on it, if you think it's a little bit overblown. But from my point of view, there's two reasons for America to really up the aggression against China. So one is that, yes, like you said, there's a competitor. Now there's a competitor. They don't want a competitor. But also, America is at a stage right now where they really need to find something to unify everybody on. Because right now, there's not much unity in the U.S. I mean, it's so divided, it's so split, it's looking pretty scary, at least from the outside, from an outsider's perspective. I think a war would potentially be something that could accomplish two things at once, is to potentially try to put another power back in place, and also to find some sort of a common thing to unify people on. You know, I remember, I think it was in, I can't remember the documentary.
John Pilger's documentary, Coming War with China, that one, or...
Not that one. It was Curtis.
Adam Curtis.
Adam Curtis. Yeah, he was talking about, because, you know, in the West, in these political systems, we've gotten to a point where politicians no longer deliver their people dreams; they protect them from nightmares. And from what you can see from the outside, is a lot of the times it takes first manufacturing that nightmare to protect your people against. So that's my fear. Would that be the great unifier? Would that finally be the last hope for America to have some sort of a conflict? I mean, what are your thoughts on what's going on in regards to that?
I mean, I would say that every argument that has been made about the danger of war, like, for example, like, you know, Graham Allison and Thucydides' trap and all that, should be taken very seriously, right? I mean, I read it and I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I think so. There should be all the arguments in favor of what you just said should be taken seriously. But I don't think that should lead to necessarily fear that that's going to happen, because, you know, I don't think, and not everyone agrees with me on this, but I just don't think that Americans want war. I think the general attitude in America is very anti-war. We hate, generally, people, and I'm not talking about just, you know, progressive do-gooders. I'm talking about, you know, even people that storm the Capitol, right? Your average typical American hates war, because they're the ones that had to serve in the damn thing. And we're sick of it. We've been at war for 20 years. We know our government's lie. We associate wars with with lies. And the U.S. now covers up war in the sense that we don't, you know, we're conducting a war in Yemen. We're conducting a war in Somalia. We're conducting a war all over the world. But we don't really report on it, because we know that Americans don't like war. And we don't really like watching, like, you know, we like fantasy war, we like Star Wars, right? But we don't like real war. And so I don't think it's the great unifier. I think it's a unifier only at the political level, where you'll see Democrats talk shit about China and Russia, and you'll see Republicans talk even more shit about China and Russia. And so they're playing some game of optics where they're just trying to avoid being accused of being Beijing Biden, or, you know, the Manchurian Candidate or something like that. But when it comes down to actually committing boots on the ground and, you know, really seriously contemplating war, I think, you know, America's a paper tiger, and we're not. Nobody wants it. Nobody has an appetite for it. It doesn't make any sense to anybody in America. Sure, we're a little bit racist. You know, we may say a lot of nasty things about China, but I don't think anybody in their right mind is supportive of a war with China. You know,
the thing that I agree with what you're saying, that nobody wants war. I just I'm thinking back to two kinds of things where. So the first would be where somebody says it's absolutely impossible this would happen. Obviously, before Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, when America was putting some restrictions on the oil exports and things like that, kind of tightening that up a bit, there was an understanding that Japan would never, ever dare to attack the U.S. And I'm not drawing that as a parallel saying China would attack the U.S. I think actually it would happen in the opposite way. Particularly probably with some sort of a conflict in the South China Sea, which is probably why Taiwan's getting more and more relevant. But I also look back to what happened to the approval rating of these people before war, and what happened? What was the catalyst? How did they get people on board for it? So, for example, with Iraq, when they put the Kuwaiti girl on stage talking about the babies being thrown from incubators, after that aired, all of a sudden, people were like, "We need to do something about this." And now BBC, reposted 4 times within 24 hours a first-hand account of somebody talking about the human rights abuses in China. And this is somebody whose story changed 3 times. She's on her 3rd or 4th version of the story. Mm-hmm. And they're really pushing this out. So for me, those are like the warning signs for me, where it's like, you got to tenderize the population with some of these stories. That's what I feel like is happening. And then the purpose... so those are the red flags for me. And then the purpose underneath ties into a lot of the stuff we're talking about America not being unified, America losing its position in the world. It's not going to do anything for the ordinary American person, but that's my argument. That's my.
Oh no, those are very serious arguments. I'm not, I think those are all really dangerous things. I'm just saying that for people who are worried about this risk, which I think and I'm worried about it. And I think for that specific audience that's taking that seriously, I think sometimes, and I've noticed this happen online in the conversation, is that, we think we're pushing against the mainstream narrative that's not taking it seriously, right? So that's what the conversation says. And I think the effect of that is that we end up building a case that might be a little bit more worried, or what's the word, like, sure that there's a war is a huge risk. Like we're convincing ourselves that it's a huge risk. But I'm saying that if we take it really seriously, that we've got to consider the fact that, like, I mean, America's in no shape to fight a war. American people, by and large, will not sign up to go fight a war. It would be the most devastating thing. Like, and the Pentagon would never sign off on it, because every time they've gamed out something in Taiwan, it ends up in a nuclear war. So it's not invading, it's not liberating Kuwait. It's not the same operation. It's not invading Iraq or Afghanistan. This is existentially
big. This is big time.
Yeah. And I just don't. I think that what it would take to tip that rock over, while. Yeah, I mean, some fucked up thing can happen in the South China Sea, but, like, I would. It just seems so fantastical that would happen, that I don't really wait for I don't expect it to happen. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, I hope you're right, and that. But I also hope that some people kind of jump on this level of concern earlier rather than later, because it seems like we're just getting closer and closer to a point where you just need one small catalyst, one small spark to just take all of this built-up aggression and turn it into something that nobody wants and nobody ever expected. That's part of the reason why.
Totally agreed. And I think, just as far as if you narrow the conversation down to people who are taking it seriously, who are worried, I think that's something that's missing within that conversation. Now, it's become a little bit echo chambery, because its main purpose is to push against the almost total lack of concern out in the mainstream, right? And I'm just saying, like, for a serious conversation to develop, it is true. I think that there are a lot of things that are mitigating against that, and we can take a little bit of hope in that.
Right. Yeah. No, I hope so. All right. Yeah. So maybe what we can wrap up with is a little bit about, in the event that war doesn't become the unifier for Americans, and not that it always necessarily plays out that way, and we've just got to, rely on good old fashioned hard work to fix the problems of America. What is it that happens next door? What is it like? What does what happens say about the state of capitalism in America? And what do you personally hope it happens from here?
I think that's the answer. Is that I don't know if unity is something that's. I think like you say, okay, what's going to? The fear is like, okay, what will unify America? A war with China? Like in the past, every time we need national unity, we go fight a war. And I'm saying, like, now, like, I don't see that assumption. I don't think works, because I don't think that unity is going to happen. And I think that, the reality is that in America, we're so divided in every single dimension. We're divided by race. We're divided by age. We're divided by geography. We're divided by party, and above all, we're divided by wealth. And there's too many divisions in our society that we actually need to address. That we can't just paper over it anymore with unifying slogans or even a war that we would lose. So I think the next step is we've really got to have. There's going to be a lot of social conflict within America. I think the war is going to be inside our borders. And outside, of course, in the places that we are waging war. But I think that the escalation of American conflict is going to be happening inside our borders. And I think you see a lot of people saying, have pointed this out, that the weapons of empire come home. So the AK-47, as an example, was developed. Not the AK-47. The AR-15 was developed as a piece of weaponry to fight more effectively in Vietnam, right? And now we're seeing for the past several years the AR-15 being having a sort of second life as a weapon of domestic terror. And so that's the kind of thing that we're starting to see, is that a lot of what we used to export in terms of violence is coming back into the United States. And so I would worry as an American. I am worried about it as an American, much more about the violence happening day to day already at levels that we've not seen in a long time in New York. The number of shootings and the violence has gone through the roof. I'm a lot more worried about that as an American than fighting a war with China. And right. For China, I'm sure that they're very they're preparing for the Americans to do something dangerous and something stupid. But I think the reality living here in America is that the danger is much more here at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, and then the what transpired and what it says about the state of finance and capitalism in America is an issue that needs to be worked through too. So, if you have anything else, I guess maybe what I'd like to know is, are you optimistic in any way about anything, or are you a little bit more on that? You're like, I don't know where this is I don't know what what's going to happen from here.
Long term, I am, in the sense that these things have, the things that people are very angry and upset about have been true for a long time. Capitalism didn't turn bad in the past 3 years. Our democracy was not, corrupted, since 2016 only. And the wealth inequality in America didn't suddenly appear, 8 years ago or whatever. Like the problems that are coming to a head now have been embedded in our society for a long time. And I'm optimistic in the sense that finally it seems like we're getting to a point in America where we're going to be taking those conflicts seriously. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't think the conflicts that we're having are just sort of like are just sort of gratuitous and we're just fighting for no reason. And I think people who call for unity are trying to make us believe that the reason we're fighting is because we don't believe in America anymore. That's just a bunch of horse shit. The reason we're fighting is because we have too much inequality. The reason we're fighting is because we have racial problems that we've never resolved properly. We have history that we haven't addressed, and all these things. So am I optimistic? I'm optimistic in the sense that we're finally getting around to addressing this stuff and having a proper fight about it rather than papering it over again. Right. I don't know if that means that we're going to have a safe and happy 2021. But no guarantees. I think there is no guarantee that these things were going to be resolved in an easy, pleasant way for ourselves. So we're going to reap what we sow.
So do you think if, obviously other than the racial issues, probably, would you agree that the wealth gap is one of the single most important things that needs to be fixed, the inequality in that sense?
They're all tied. They're all inextricably tied. The wealth gap always has a racial component to it.
Right, yeah. So what happens for me? Because for me, somebody who's a little bit, more anti-imperialism and
sure.
pro, kind of social structures that would benefit Americans, like you said, was somebody like, at least again from my perspective, was somebody like Bernie Sanders, and you didn't even get a chance to vote for him. So what is it going to take? Is it going to take like a younger version of Bernie Sanders to come along and say, okay, no, that's it, we gotta fix this? Because who's going to do it? Where is it going to happen? Sure, it's great that all the people are upset about this, but how does that actually manifest into to actual change?
I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, and I think at this point, history is in control. I don't know if anybody's in control. I don't know if anyone has a plan. I don't know if an organized political movement to get Congress people elected to primary against neolibs and putting in DSAs is going to be result in anything. I mean, I think people are going to try. People are going to have their theories as to what should be done or what could be done, and that's great. But I think at this point, Americans, if they're honest, I think we realize like we are not in control anymore. It's like these people in the Wall Street bets. The thing gets bigger than any single person can do. Like it snowballs. It's not under control, and whatever is going to come is going to come. So at this point, I'm thinking like, it's better to be prepared and to just sort of kind of interpret what's going on rather than think like there's anything that we can do about it. Because I mean, the stuff that's happening is like nobody can predict. Who could predict that this GameStop thing coming out of Reddit would be this huge story that actually put the financial system in America under severe stress? Who would have predicted that people would storm the Capitol? What's going to happen next week or the 2 weeks from now or throughout 2021 is so far beyond the ability for anyone to predict under existing understandings of anything. And so I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, history is just going to take over.
Yeah. So I guess the ingredients are there for something to happen now because people are kind of waking up. They're aware. This is the part that you're optimistic about, is people know that there's a serious issue with the system. What actually ends up happening could be something as obscure as what happened with GameStop or any of these other things that are happening.
Yeah.
Is that kind of I've understood it correctly?
I think so. I think it's just like, look, we're spectators and participants, but we are not in control. And you know what I mean? So the question of what's to be done, it wouldn't matter because if you had the right answer, you wouldn't be able to do it anyway. It's just things are just going to happen. And the best you could do is try and predict what's going to happen. Get a set or understand as it's happening, why it's happening and what the significance of it is, which is, I think, what we were trying to do here and trying to interpret, debrief ourselves on what Wall Street Bets is all about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I think it's going to be like. It's like trying to interpret what happened.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So is this, are these the kinds of things that we can expect to hear on your podcast also for people interested in it, exploring some of these issues?
Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about Asian American, like it's an Asian American podcast where we talk about things from an Asian American perspective, and in particular, and just as a bait, because I think of Asian American, that sounds very dry. But what we try to do is, and I think Asian Americans have a reputation for being sort of politically bland and being a model minority and stuff, and very class aspirational. We want white collar jobs and all that thing. And so we talk about sort of like the crisis that the current times are presenting for that mentality. And I think it's interesting to talk about. I encourage people to listen to it just because I think that the Asian American model minority mentality is not really a racial identity. It's indicative of a lot of how other people think too. I mean, Asian Americans are not the only model minority. And so we just try and question that a lot. And we try to, delve into what it means to be, or how to interpret the world and deal with the world as it is. And leaving behind, I guess, obsolete notions that from the 90s or 2000s.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't work in this new world. So that's escape from Plan A. Awesome. If you want to find it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. No, that sounds great. I'm going to refer everybody over to it. Definitely sounds interesting. It's been really great speaking to you, and we'll of course continue speaking offline as well.
Yeah. Likewise. Thanks. I really hope I can try some of your sour beer sometime. So.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Yeah, when everything opens back up, definitely come over.
Yeah, I'm in Guangzhou a lot, so it's an easy ride over.
Sounds good. All right, thanks again.
Thanks, man.
Take
Bye.
care.